what I want to find out, because I know you guys go through multiple rounds of training. Have you all had a presentation at some point or another on PTSD?
Yes.
Okay. That's what I thought. So what we're not going to do is go through the criteria for PTSD. If you wish to have the criteria, you can always ask them to send you this presentation. They have that, they'll email it to you anytime you ask for it. You can go and look at it online. The PTSD criteria is very consistent, it's online. Go to the DSM-5 psychiatric website, anywhere, WebMD, any of those things will have all of that stuff. That is readily available. That is not my point here today. I am very concerned about PTSD, but I'm not as concerned about just PTSD. Because now these are getting to be pretty much useless for me if we're not going through the criteria. We know what the diagnosis definition is for the PTSD. It is approximately 8% of returning soldiers have diagnosable PTSD. That is professionally diagnosed, not self-diagnosed, because that becomes much hotter on the self-diagnosis. In a hierarchy of diagnosis, PTSD is really at the top. The only way you get to PTSD is to eliminate the other reasons that you may be experiencing some difficulties. Anxiety, depression, difficulty concentrating, impulse control, things of that nature that could be seen with PTSD can be seen with multitudes of diagnoses. That has always been the biggest issue with people understanding diagnostic codes, is that it's like the first year medical students. As they're reading through their first year of medical books, they have every disease that they're reading about, because the criteria can be that generalized. It's not just that you're anxious. Who of us are not anxious at times? That doesn't necessarily make a criteria met. My big issue that I've always had with doing the yellow ribbons and doing the military process is that, number one, going through combat, being in a war situation, there is nothing normal about that at all. It may feel normal to you because you train to make it normal. I've had several friends that were deployed, some of which, when they said they were going, I asked them, why? You don't have to go. They're not making you go. You're begging them to go. Why are you begging them to go? And he said, think of it this way. If you practiced football every day for the last 15 years and you never got to play in a single game, that's not what you're out there practicing for. You want to be able to get in the game. That made sense to me. And I understood why he wanted to participate in that, why he wanted to let the skills that he had accumulated through his military service be utilized. Other people don't understand that. Y'all are a unique group of people. You're here for a specific reason. This is not a draft system anymore. You're all here because you wanted to be here to one degree or another. You had other options and you chose these options. And that makes you a very unique group of people. But one of the problems that I've had in the military is that after Vietnam, the PTSD, diagnosable PTSD percentages were over 30% of soldiers returning had diagnosable PTSD, most of which was not addressed in the early stages. There's an early onset and a late onset. And the faster you get the treatment that you need, the normal period of time for intense symptomatic issue is 6 months. If you can get to it in time and the stressors are controllable, you can have this thing much better off, in more control, in 6 months. If this happens later, or if there's a real delay in the amount of time before you get the treatment that you need, then the prognosis is much worse. It takes many more years, sometimes your entire lifetime, to get through these things. That's where the military came in with this. They are so hot and heavy on PTSD because it's an issue that they can't really get their hands around because they have a particular problem with this. As Colonel Bush said, they're begging you to ask for help. The help's available. I've never seen more help available. And you're in a position now where you have all of that at your disposal. When you're no longer in the military, you won't have all of that as readily at your disposal as you do now. So please utilize it. I told Major Hutchinson one day, I said, I would like to see everybody who returns from any deployment be required to spend at least 3 months in therapy. Whether they need it or not. Just, if nothing else, just to talk through things, just to check things out. Just see if there's anything that needs to be addressed. But here's the problem that the military has. They train it out of you. I don't believe your drill sergeant ever asked you how you feel about one of his orders. Never did, never will. Because their job is to train you to be a unquestioning military machine. Work together, work well, get in, get the job done, get out safely. We don't have time to debate that in a military situation, in a war-like situation. Then you come home, you've been home 30 to 60 days. And now they're telling you, now we want you to tell us how you feel and ask for help. Where 6, 8 weeks ago, 10 weeks ago, nobody asked you to tell you how you felt, and nobody asked you to ask for help. You did your job, you relied on each other, and you didn't ask too many questions, because those normally don't come back with a very good answer. And now, throwing the light switch, you're supposed to be able to feel comfortable asking for help, talking about what your experiences were, and moving forward from that. That is the difficulty that they're having. And it's a situation I don't know an answer to. I'm not smart enough to figure out how are they going to put those two things together and keep both of them running really well. Because the military has, for years, figured out how to train soldiers to go to war. They do it quite well. Y'all are outstanding at it. Best, as the Colonel said, best in the world. But how do you take that and in a short period of time ask you to throw away the things that they've been beating down in you for years, and now all of a sudden become very warm, fuzzy, and asking for help? Difficult thing to do. If there is just one message that you get out of this whole thing today, is while you have the time, go and get any of the resources that you can get to that. Many of you can't even imagine sitting in a social worker or a psychiatrist's office and talking about what's going on. It is clearly an anxious situation to go through. But I assure you, if you find the right person to talk to, it'll be the best decision you've ever made. Another thing that I have an issue with, we have a horribly underdiagnosed PTSD as well as a horribly overdiagnosed PTSD. That doesn't seem to make sense. But this is how I'll explain it. Soldiers are very high on the list of diagnosing themselves with PTSD. If you have those symptoms, by all means, go and get yourself checked out. It's no different than if you were diabetic, if you had high blood pressure, cholesterol issues. You can't fix some of these things by yourself. You can't wish it away. You certainly can't. If you could control the thoughts and emotions that you had, the images that you see, the anxiety that you feel, then you would have fixed it already. You wouldn't let it have gotten to this point. Another thing that occurs is that a deployment can aggravate other mental health issues that are not necessarily PTSD related. If you had anxiety, if you were obsessive compulsive, if you had a mood disorder, if you were depressed, if you had bipolar, if you had things like that that were part of your existence before you were ever deployed, the deployment didn't cause it. The deployment may have aggravated it. But you still now have the ability. They are practically begging you to go and get checked out if you have any problems whatsoever. Individual people, because certainly we don't have your entire unit here. If not, y'all are the smallest unit I've ever seen. Individual people are far less likely to go independently on their own, make an appointment with somebody and say, look, this is what's going on. This is what my issues are right now. How can I get this thing taken care of? They are far less likely to do that. But they are far more likely to have someone that they serve with say to them, hey, you need to go get checked out. You're worrying me. Go do it while you can, get it fixed, get it over with, and I want you to be happy. I want you to be okay. They respect that because you guys have a camaraderie. Y'all have fought together. Y'all have taken you've had each other's backs all this time. To hear that from somebody who was in your unit, someone that you served with previously, that's the powerful part. So you guys may ignore your own symptoms, refuse to go, and I hope you don't do that. But if you see a friend of yours who is struggling, by all means, talk to them about it. Get them to the right people. John will be coming up in a little while to explain some of the crisis numbers and intervention things that they have going on. That's where we come together again. Our goal is to have you as well or better, physically and mentally, after your deployment as you were before your deployment. Because it is owed to you to make you as whole and as well as you can be for the service that you gave to your country. Anything less than that, I would feel disappointed in what the military was doing for you. Okay. So, what I want to make sure of is I want you to understand that true PTSD is not rampant amongst all of you. Some of the symptoms that you're going to deal with, for example, for the last 4 years, I've been dealing with your children. The ones that were at the yellow ribbons, they had the whole children's section. When I first started to do this, they said, we want you to present for the return. So I said, fine. Then I asked him, said, well, you got all of this program here for the children, but other than entertaining them, do you ever sit down and talk to them? He said, no. I said, well, look, why don't we just have groups with the kids that come? And just let me start talking to them, see what they think. Because your children are incredibly honest. That's what I love about them. You ask them, they'll tell you. So I was asking one little girl, what is the oddest behavior that your dad has since he's gotten back? She goes, well, he won't drive. He rides in the passenger seat. I said, okay. And when we come to a stop sign or a red light, he looks around and he says, check. She goes, I'm not sure why he is saying check. I said, well, my assumption is your dad rode in the passenger seat for most of his rides in Afghanistan. And check is used so that he is responsible for making sure that his side is safe, and somebody else is responsible for making sure the other side is safe, and that's how they communicate with each other. When it's okay, they'll say check, and they're ready to go. And they're trying to protect each other. She goes, well, he doesn't need protection here. We were going to eat dinner. Said, it's a habit. It's something that he has gotten into a habit of. It'll take a little time, just like driving. He'll switch over to the driver's seat sooner or later. But this is what he's comfortable with right now. And that comfort level, that routine is what got him through everything as safe as possible. It takes a little time to get that out of him. That hypervigilance, that is a sign of PTSD. But is that a single qualifier for PTSD? Absolutely not. You can't get into the routines you've gotten into and just drop them the moment you get back home and don't have the same experiences. So the children have been wonderful at explaining to us, and I would encourage you guys to listen to what your kids tell you. If they're coming up to you and asking you, why are you so sad? Or why do you sit in that room by yourself? Why don't you interact with us? Why won't you come play with me? Listen to what they're saying. If they're telling you these kinds of things, it should be enough for you to say, there might be something going on here. I probably do want to go and see why I am on edge at all times. Another great story, the children, she said, when we go into a restaurant, we have to change tables 2 or 3 times before we sit down. I said, well, why would you do that? She says, Dad will not sit anywhere unless his back is against the wall and he's looking towards the front door. Training. They're supposed to constantly know what's going on. They're supposed to know how to get in, how to get out, how to be safe. When every day you go out and you do a job and you have no idea where the danger might come from, if you don't become hypervigilant, you might become dead. How do you turn that off that fast? You don't. That is not the issue that's going to cause you the greatest difficulty. That is an issue that is going to work itself out. As the stress level in your life decreases, your body starts to realize that you are not under this kind of tension all the time. And that kind of tension, that kind of stress, that kind of anxiety every single day takes a toll on you physically and mentally. I don't care who you are. I don't care how strong you think you are. I don't care how mentally capable you think you are. That's like running every day, all day. You're going to sooner or later break down. You got a question?
Yeah, I have a question. All right, so you say that it'll take place over a period of time, but
What will take place?
well,
Like that de-escalation of the symptom?
exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
What is the period of time for that? Is it just different for each person, or is
Well,
there something that you should be looking at after, say, 3 months? All right, then it should be stabilized.
3 to 6 months is what they normally put you in a time frame. If something persists past 6 months, it may be an issue. Now, and we're talking about persisting. Now, if you're still hypervigilant 6 months later, your body's had and your mind's had time to readjust to not being in that pressure cooker all day, every day. If it doesn't continuously start to get better, then that's something I would be concerned about. If you stay hypervigilant the whole time, you might need to see somebody, because your body just can't hold on to that. And what will happen with you, and we see a lot of this, is that your body has been under that kind of pressure. Your mind has been under that kind of pressure. You get home, there's a whole nother list of things that you have to adjust to. You can only take so many stressors before the system just shuts it down. And you will just fold up within yourself. You cannot keep that pressure up for that long without some sort of a break. What happens typically is you start getting people who are under these stressors and they do what they've always figured out how to do. I'm not real stressed when I'm drinking. So they start binge drinking. Maybe every once in a while, maybe every time they get stressed, they start drinking. They may pick up more smoking. They may start using their own prescription drugs. They may be using drugs that are not prescription. They will find, without proper channeling, they will find some way to make these feelings and these anxieties go down. It's going to be only temporary, and you may develop yourself into a habit and a problem that's worse than the habit you were trying to fix. But when people do not seek out proper help for that, you will try to self-medicate. You will try to figure out some way to make these feelings stop, because it's exhausting and you can't keep it up forever. The saddest part that I see is that people who come in after deployment don't take advantage of any of the services that are available, wind up discharging, heading out into society, civilian life, and by the time they have imploded, there's not nearly as much resources available as quickly as they had in the past. They may have already made a shambles out of everything they have on their personal life. And I see that as just a sad thing, because it didn't have to get there. If you recognize any of it, go get it looked at. There is nothing at all psychiatrically wrong with you. Crazy is a term. They said, how do you work with people who are crazy? I don't work with anyone who is crazy. Crazy people shouldn't be around us. If they are going to harm me, if they're completely out of their mind, then what I can do for them, they couldn't understand anyway. I have never worked with a crazy person. I've worked with schizophrenics, I've worked with multiple personality, bipolar, all of that. Those people are not crazy. Those people have an issue that needs to be worked on. And it can be fixed, and it can be controlled, and you can have a productive, smooth life. But you cannot keep these stressors going for this long. If that's all you get out of this, and I hope you got anything out of this, I'd be happy. Don't let these symptoms go unchecked. And please, you do not understand the power that you have to speak to somebody who is in your unit, who you say, dude, you're not coming out of this too well. You need to go see somebody. That encouragement may save that man's life. Because one of the problems we have with unaddressed mental health issues post-deployment is suicide. And the suicide rate has risen dramatically in the last 3 to 4 years. Because there is nothing normal about war. Nothing. We were not made to go through that and not have any damage to us at all. Human beings are not made that way. If we are, we would all be savages. Because it's a brutal, brutal thing. So take that into consideration. Talk to your friends about things that you see with them and utilize what you can.